Welcome to the Making the Most of Your Piece of Nature series, hosted by the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry. In this series, we invite you to transform your piece of nature, creating a refuge for native wildlife and insects, and a place to enjoy the beauty of our native flora and fauna.
Hello, welcome to our video called Hayfields to Habitat. I'm Dave Cole, I'm the forester with the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry, and we are making this video to help give homeowners some ideas on how they can improve the wildlife habitat in their backyards.
So my wife and I purchased our property about 14 years ago. It's roughly about 40 acres. 8 acres of it was field. And starting with the field, it had been used as a horse pasture. It hadn't technically been farmed. It was just mainly grass, and it was dominated by reed canary grass. We were going to be moving to the property, and I wanted to make it the best wildlife habitat I could, understanding that the reed canary grass wasn't providing a whole lot of beneficial habitat. So the first thing we did when we came in, the whole field had been mowed, so it kind of looked like a yard. From that point on, I wanted to start kind of dissecting it and making it smaller lots instead of just one big 8-acre grass field. So we started by treating some invasive species, that being multiflora rose, honeysuckle, and the reed canary grass, just to try to get some things started and get the fields to start to revert a little bit. And then we also did the supplemental planting. So we started with the herbicide and tried to shift the reed canary grass and try to get it to a little more beneficial forbs, get the goldenrods and the asters started, and then we started doing some supplemental planting after that. The very first step with the spraying, it knocked the reed canary grass back to when you could all of a sudden you could start to see the goldenrod and the asters coming along, and that really got the fields to start to revert fairly quickly. Then you started to see your brambles coming in, your blackberries, your raspberries, things of that nature. The elderberries started to kind of pop up. And then, like I said, with the supplemental planting, these spruce trees right here, I planted those probably the spring after we bought the property. So they're 13 years old roughly. And like I said, as you can see, growing in with everything here, it's reverted quickly because of having that hand in on manipulating the species. So this is the reed canary grass right here. And this entire field used to be dominated by it, but as you can see, it's much more minimal now, and it provides a lot better wildlife habitat because now you have soft mass producing brambles in here, you have the cover from the spruce trees producing, and then you also, with little gaps because of the goldenrod and asters they're creating in the soil, you get your forbs growing in underneath that, so it creates excellent habitat for small game species too. Okay, I've planted everything from high bush cranberry, I've planted dogwoods, I've planted hazelnuts, I've planted hickory trees, I've planted chestnut trees. Sky's the limit. I like diversity. What I was looking at is I wanted to have all kinds of soft mass producers, hard mass producers, shrubs, trees. I don't want this to become a forest. I want to maintain it as reverting shrubland, essentially. So I went less with trees and heavier to shrubs. The other thing, when you talk about supplemental planting and things that I have planted, I've also planted an apple orchard. And what I tried to do with the apple orchard, that's both for consumption of my family and then for wildlife to utilize too. So what we did was we picked species that dropped at various times of the year. So it's starting with species that dropped apples starting in July, August, and then run the whole way through the winter so that there's available food for them at all times of the year.
Things you plant.
Okay, so this is the apple orchard that we had planted. And as I had described earlier, we tried to go with species that drop the apples at different times. So starting with June, July, we get apples here, and then they carry them on into the winter. Some of these species, which if you look on the trees right now, you can still see that some of the apples are hanging on. And we get quite a few deer that come in here all through the summer and feed on the apples that drop. You very rarely can ever find an apple on the ground here. Usually the deer have them picked up pretty much every evening. But we also did plant some plum and peaches in here as well. Okay, so this area here, what I did was I did the supplemental planting like we've seen in the other spots, but this was pushed more towards hard mass producing species. So I planted some sawtooth oak, I planted some chestnut trees, I've also planted some walnut trees and some butternut that I started from the actual nut. I planted in some containers and got them started. You can see some wire baskets around. What I like to do is I start them out in tubes, and then once they get to the top of the tubes, I pull the tubes off and I put a wire basket around them. Some of these tubes, you can see there's either a smaller seedling in them that hasn't come out of the tube yet, or possibly the seedling died, and if that's the case, the following spring I'll pull the tube off, I'll put a new seedling in and reinsert the tube and start all over again. So one of the things you can see here is over the years with knocking the reed canary grass out and the native asters and the goldenrods have taken off, you know, I didn't have to plant these, so there was no input in that aspect, but it provides great wildlife habitat because even with the heavy snows, you can see that we still have upright stems. We have where they have knocked over, but then it provides a little, almost like a brush pile where a rabbit can go underneath, meadow voles, things of that nature. So it's great habitat that actually lasts throughout the year. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a little cornfield, and as going back to what we had described at first, we took the original 8 acres and then I split it up into smaller lots. We did the supplemental plantings of the seedlings and stuff like that, but then this section I rotate corn, and then I'll do clover. Sometimes we do sunflowers, but this is just simply for wildlife to feed them. We know we don't have to supplement their feeding, but it attracts the wildlife. We like to see them. The ground is riddled with deer tracks. We've got rabbit tracks on the ground. You can see there's fox that are coming in and hunting the rabbits and stuff like that. And we'll always get turkeys in here, so it's nice to see the wildlife and how much they use it. Yeah, we got to the point now where, I mean, we have deer, turkey, like you said, even the occasional bear that comes through, rabbits in our yard. Literally, they walk through the yards at pretty much all hours of the day, and we enjoy seeing them for sure. The biggest thing that I've seen is goldfinches. A lot, because we have a lot of thistle on the property, which that's what the goldfinches feed on. So I've seen a huge increase in goldfinches, red-winged blackbirds. We've got a lot of red-winged blackbirds. We have a lot of tree swallows. We also have a lot of bluebirds. I've put up a lot of bluebird boxes around my fields, which my daughters and I check and clean every spring. And so yeah, there's been a huge increase in birds. The other thing, I grew up as a rabbit hunter, and when we first bought the property and had the reed canary grass fields, there were very few rabbits here at all. But after we went and did this, the spraying and the conversion of the fields and the supplemental plantings and manipulating these little lots, the increase in rabbit population had exploded. We actually, my daughter and I, when I would take her to softball practice and we would come home in the evenings, we would have a little competition to see how many rabbits we could count, and our record was 12 going out our driveway.
Okay, Scott, thank you very much for that great tour you gave us and explaining all the work that you've done and why you did it. It wasn't just random things that you did. There's a purpose to everything to improve the habitat. Thank you for that. I should point out that Scott gave me a list of all the trees and shrubs he has on his property. And again, a lot of these are in the woods naturally. But altogether, he has 59 species of trees and shrubs on his property, and only 22 of those were planted. All the rest of them were there purely naturally, either in the woods or they have volunteered in the field or in the hedgerow in the years since he's been working there. Now we will go and have a tour with another friend of mine who has taken a really different approach to it. Scott was very systematic and organized in the way he laid out his field, very deliberate about it. Gary likes the look of the woods, the feel of the woods, so he has taken a much more random, natural approach to how he has been foresting his 7 acres around his house. So let's see what Gary has to say.
Okay, so in the fall of 1984, I came here and looked out over this hillside and those beautiful fall foliage colors. I was looking for a place to get out of town and have a more place in the country with land. So purchased this property, and at the time it was a hayfield. This is all mowed for hay. The first thing I did actually was to put a trees, spruce, white pine, along the property line, and that was the first tree planting I did. That would be the year later, 1985. And those trees have really filled in very well and made a very nice transition from their mowed property to my what's becoming forested hayfield, which is no longer a hayfield, it's turning more to a forest. So, 1990, this is all open field. When I became a forester, I bought some trees from our state nursery, which you could do back then, and I started to plant things like black locust and red pine and Norway spruce, and we'll see a little bit of those closer up there down here in the field. And any wild apple trees, because I like apples, and there are wild apple trees that volunteer in this field, and I let them grow up and then I grafted onto them, as well as plant trees. These are standard varieties like yellow transparent and wine sap and such are also part of the orchard. So basically you quit mowing, the goldenrod's going to come in, but if you plant trees, then you can start the trajectory of where you want this to go. And I'm learning as I'm going. Things change. I'm not so much keen on red pine and Scotch pine. I really like the black locust. It makes great fence posts. It makes great firewood, which I use to heat my house. And I'm also struggling with controlling invasives. Autumn olive, tartaric and honeysuckle, and multiflora rose are the big 3 that I have to deal with. But with trees dominating the overstory, it's easy to keep them controlled. And this is a great way to bring in wildlife. Right behind the camera, the ground is just littered with rabbit tracks. Of course, deer have a major path through that, from that woods through my property to get to the woods on the other side. Okay, behind me is a hillside leading up to my house, and nearly all the trees you see in there, the black locust, are trees that I planted. Now, without mowing, you also can get some volunteer trees. So I have ash growing in there, ash leaf maple, and there's even some black cherry that popped up, and sumac. And then other trees volunteer. Here's a wild crabapple that just kind of pops up in a field, and they're all through here. And in this case, I cut it off and I grafted on a regular variety of apple. This one happens to be a Rayburn. Now, the rest of this, since my graft now is successful, I'm going to go ahead and cut out some of the rest of this. But I've taken a wild apple and I have grafted on a good apple, and this is something that I couldn't do if I kept this area mowed. So by letting the tree grow, I have some grafting material. And if you look on the ground around you, I see rabbit, there's some fox, turkey went through here, and of course, deer. You make the habitat, the animals will use it. In 5, I bought some Norway spruce to use as Christmas trees. And needless to say, the ones that were not used for Christmas trees kept growing. And this has created a really nice patch of thermal cover, which is used by wildlife, especially birds, during the dead of winter, a place for them to hang out. And you can see all through the ground here, little bird prints and their nests in here. Yes, I did get Christmas trees out of them for years, but now that they're larger, they provide other benefits. So if you can plant some conifers, especially Norway spruce, deer don't tend to eat it, and they do very well. Now behind me, you're looking at some Staghorn Sumac. And these were volunteers. I didn't plant any of this, but I allowed them to keep growing. And you see they have nice seed heads on them. And it's amazing how the birds will utilize those during the winter and early spring. I've seen flocks of robins, cardinals, even crows hanging on them, pecking at the staghorns, or the sumac fruiting bodies. But what I'll do is occasionally go in there and I'll cut some down, utilize them for firewood or a campfire, and then that encourages new suckers to grow up from the roots, which perpetuates the Staghorn Sumac clump. Another technique for easy maintenance of wildlife habitat. Well, hands off in a way that I don't put a lot of energy into it. I do plant some trees, but once they're planted and they're protected and they get above the deer, they're free to grow. And I don't have to do any maintenance in here other than occasionally going through and doing some invasive species treatment, which may be maybe 8 hours per year. Other than that, I get the satisfaction of looking over a forest, of the wildlife moving through it. I've even have a deer stand down at the end of my property where the deer pass through, and I've been able to harvest some deer as they come through. And then just taking my grandsons out yesterday and showing them the difference between a canine footprint, in this case probably a fox, and a cat footprint. Yep. Fox, coyote, raccoon, I know possum, rabbits. We have a lot of wildlife here, which is a point. If you want wildlife, they will come, but make sure you want them.
Thank you, Gary, for that great tour. Really appreciate that. And then as everyone can see, you've taken the more natural approach. It looks more like the woods. It just has a different feel to it than what Scott did. But the animals don't care. The wildlife doesn't care. They call it home, however it's set up. So it really doesn't matter. It's just a personal preference for the people, whatever they want, whatever's appropriate, and the options are wide open. Gary counted up all the species at his place, which started out purely as a hayfield. There was nothing growing there when he moved there in '85, and he has 53 species altogether, of which 24 were planted, and the rest were all volunteers, came in naturally over the years. So you don't have to plant everything, just plant something, get started, quit mowing, and the rest will come. So this last segment, we're going to go down to Greene County, where my colleague Russ went out to the landowner's property and asked her to explain the process that she went through last year to plant about 500 red oak seedlings in one day. So let's see what Russ and Rebecca have to say about planting a large number of trees in one day.
We have Rebecca Trigger. She's one of our Greene County Forest Stewards. And we're going to talk a little bit about her bare root planting that she did this past spring. It's about 2 acres. Well, can you tell us, why would you want to convert this, or why did you convert this?
Well, I converted it because if the hay wasn't being used anymore, it was land that wasn't serving a purpose. And I wanted to add native red oak to my existing forest. I lacked in red oaks. I also wanted to put pollinator plots. So I wanted to increase the carbon sequestration with the trees, and also encourage wildlife. Well, a tractor with a brush hog. Of course, a lot of volunteers. Information from my service forester from the DCNR, Russell Gibbs. Also, it took tree tubes. It took the saplings, bare root saplings that I bought from Musser Forestry Supplies. It took a dibble, lots of dibbles, and it took the bare root saplings, and also hydrogel flakes. Well, through all that was involved, of course, my service forester, Russell Gibbs, helped me. My son, Mark, and Russell, and I, we plotted out the plantings with a very long tape measure. We marked where each tree was going to be planted with a survey flag. And then later on, when we decided on a date, and the good date was Arbor Day, then I got the local Envirothon team involved, volunteers of school students, and friends and family, and a big stack of pizza. And on the day of the planting, which we coordinated to be as close to Arbor Day as possible, we had one person that took the bare root saplings, dipped them in hydrogel. We put them in large muck tubs. The muck tubs were then put on the back of my side-by-side. A person would run them up here to the planting area. And of course, since we had marked the area with flags, survey flags, the students and all the people helping knew exactly where the trees went. And then from that, we divided the volunteers up basically into 3 groups. There were the people who actually used the dibble to plant the trees. Then another group would come along and put the tubes and put the stakes. And then another group came along, and they were the tires, and they tied off the tree. So with all of those volunteers, with being prepared, with having it already marked out, and having all the supplies, it went very smoothly.
Thank you, Russ and Rebecca, for explaining all the work and planning and preparation that went into getting ready to plant about 500 seedlings in one day. Clearly, that's not something that you can just do on a whim. You need to really be ready for that, or it will not be successful. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you all for staying with us through this film. We hope it was very helpful to you to get ideas, to realize what can be done, and to see how you would get started, how you go about it, to take whatever your starting point is with your yard and make it better. Doesn't matter if you have a ½ acre or 5 acres or 100 acres, you still have a backyard and you can still improve it and make it better for wildlife. And then you get to enjoy watching the wildlife. So we hope this is helpful. If you have questions, you can look online and get a lot of good information. your Bureau of Forestry service forester like myself is available to talk to you and give you advice, see what you have, what can you do, where you start. So reach out and do your homework and get started. Just make sure you do some planning and preparation, whatever the scale of your project, so it can be successful.
Thank you for joining the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry for our Making the Most of Your Piece of Nature video series. If you're interested in learning more about this topic or others, please visit DCNR's website, where you can find information on landscaping with native plants, invasive plants, and a list of service forester by county. Your service forester is a free resource to help you make the most of your piece of nature.